art exists and you should make it.
How important do you think it is for everyone to find their artistic voice?
Everybody can create beauty.
Hello, and welcome to KCRep ArtSpark. My name is Yetunde Felix-Ukwu, and I'm the Artistic Associate at KCRep Theater. ArtSpark is a new digital studio where we seek to learn from and create with a wide variety of amazing artists. On each exploration, we'll sit down with a new artist who is part of shaping Kansas City's diverse artistic scene. First, we'll enjoy a preview of art that they have specifically curated just for us. Then we'll dive into a conversation about their story, their craft, and what keeps their creative impulses firing. Last but most importantly, there's a chance for you to join in on the fun. Our artist friends will wrap up each episode by sharing an interactive art prompt so you can participate on your own at home. I am so excited to join in with you and get inspired. Enrique Chi is a musician, producer, arts leader, and activist. Born in Santiago, Panama, he moved to Kansas City when he was 6 years old and knew early on that music was his calling. He is now lead vocalist and guitarist of the Kansas City-born band Making Movies. Known for an innovative approach to music inspired by American and Latin cultures, these Latinx rock and rollers are breaking down walls in the U.S., according to Rolling Stone magazine. From their Panamanian and Mexican heritage to their fusion of international sounds and genres, Making Movies melds reinterpretations of cumbia, mambo, son, and salsa with blues and rock and roll, as well as traditional Mexican and Panamanian folklore while singing in Spanish and English. Making Movies synthesizes what's happening in Latin music better than anyone else out there today, according to MTV. They've collaborated with salsa legend Ruben Blades on the song No Te Calles, as well as Steve Berlin of Los Lobos and the late Lou Reed. No Te Calles was the first track on Blades' 2019 album Paraíso Road Gang, which was nominated for Album of the Year at the Latin Grammys. The band is made up by Panamanian brothers Enrique Chi on vocals and guitar, Diego Chi on bass, and also Mexican-American brothers Juan Carlos Chaurand on percussion and keys, and Andre Chaurand on drums. The band believes that Latin music and rock and roll are inseparable, and that without the influence of Latin music in North America, we would never have seen the birth of what we know as jazz or the blues, which are ultimately key components to rock and roll. Now, let's begin by taking a look at the latest from Making Movies.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight you're in for a spicy treat. Performing for the first time on American television, Making Movies.
Come here, babe, my little American dream, and sing something sweet to me. Yeah, sing something sweet. Oh, wait. You only lived on movie screens. You were my own little queen. But they killed you in the final scene. I've been lied to time and time again. Now I'm tired. Yes, I'm tired of killing it. So tired, so tired. And would you let me begin? So tired, so tired.
Hello. We're here with Enrique. Thank you so much for sharing all of that beautiful work with us. And now I'm excited to dive in and talk some more with you. I'd love to dive into what drew you into music. How did you know that you needed to make music? Because I know for many artists, it's a calling. So I'd love to know when you felt your calling.
For me, it definitely is a calling. It felt that way early on. I was always hanging on my dad's guitar strings. He would play guitar, and as a little kid, I would I would like just want to be around it. And he would play guitar at church, and I would grab a blow up fake guitar, and I would stand next to him for the whole duration of the set or whatever the morning, service music was. And then I'd go sit back down. And then when it's time to get back up, I'd get back up. And so I guess I always felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. And I told my parents when I was 11 that I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to be a studio musician because that sounded viable. I knew that if I said rock star, that like my parents were like, okay.
No, not happening.
I was like, I read that you can be a studio guitar player. I want to do that. So I don't want to go to college because this is what I'm going to do. And they're like, how about you think about that a little more? You're 11. But little did they know that that's kind of what I did. And I did a little bit of college, but I pretty quickly realized that wasn't the path for me, and that I wanted to dive into music. And here I am, in that journey, because it never really ends.
Awesome. I would love to know how you found your place, your niche of music, your collaborators. We know that you're a part of making movies and that you have the Rebel Song Youth Academy. How do you find your people, your village?
Originally, it was different because when we were building it. Now I think that we've kind of built a thing that it attracts the right people. Like it has its own little gravitational pull, and the right people appear usually or at the right time, so it's not a perfect system, but it is starting to function that way. But at the beginning, it really was just Tinder. We would just get on Tinder, and I'm just kidding, but it was actually MySpace was how
MySpace. Yes.
I met Juan Carlos's mother at a Matty Rhodes Day of the Dead event that I was playing music at, and Juan Carlos plays percussion in the band, and he's like my other brother in the band, because my brother Diego, he was easy to rope into the project because I just looked over at him and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing.
You're doing this."
Yeah, you're doing this because you're my little brother, and that's how things go. But so he was in the project, and then we met Juan Carlos's mother, and unbeknownst to us, Juan Carlos had already written us on MySpace, I think, or like he had seen some of the music and said, "Hey, this is interesting. Do you guys need a percussionist?" And I had ignored the message. I didn't notice it. Juan Carlos's mother we met, and she's like, I have a son. He plays music. He's very talented. And he's very handsome. I was like, oh, okay. Like, this lady, like, cool. You have a cute son. I get it. And it turned out to be that he's became my brother and my partner in all this mess. And what I had experienced that day also impacted our work. I had experienced his mother's folkloric dance group. It's a not-for-profit that they've run for over 40 years, all volunteer taught, and they use dance to keep Mexican immigrants' culture alive in the community. And so the kids that I saw dancing had grown up and were being taught by Juan Carlos and his brothers. And that attitude and that ethos of like, art exists and you should make it, but you should also use it as a way to build community and to help people connect with their own identity. That was kind of baked in from the onset, from meeting the Chowdown family. And then after that, we struggled to get bookings, we were too Latino for rock and roll clubs, and we were too American for salsa night. We were too rock and roll, too something else. And at the beginning of an artist's career, it's just hard to get booking anyways, no matter what you do. So sometimes it might just be excuses for saying no thanks. And we weren't that good too, so I can't complain that people were rejecting it. But at first, we would connect when we left town with a lot of like activist organizations. So we'd play a not-for-profit that's doing some sort of immigration reform or something work, is throwing an event, and they would book us. And they might have a little budget. They might have $100 or $200 to bring our band in, which for us, we're like, yeah, you know how much gas you can buy with $200? We could get 5 other gigs with this one, and so we would show up to these events, and it was the school of the road, I guess. Like we would hear about these issues and see how other communities were doing what they did. And we'd come back home to Kansas City, usually really informed by that.
So something that you said piqued my interest of the not too something for this, but not enough for this. Help me understand the duality of rock and roll and traditional Latin music, and what led you all down this joint path, and how it's received now, because it almost feels like both things have existed, but putting them together is something new that people are not sure how to respond to it.
Yeah, well, that was definitely our experience, and the way we're putting it together is new. Um, and I think that the idea was born really simply. My mom likes dance music. She likes anything that you can dance and shake your hips to. And my dad was more of like he likes really artsy rock and roll. So like Pink Floyd and weirder and artsier stuff that like have really deep metaphorical meaning and crazy sound effects and all that stuff. That's my dad's favorite stuff. And so I obviously loved my dad and love my dad still obviously, but I wanted to just be cool like him. So I would listen to my dad's records on headphones because my mom didn't like them that much. So I listened to his old vinyls. But then when it was time for like community music in the house, my dad, being a good husband, knows that happy wife, happy life. So he'd put on the Latin music he liked because it knew it would make her happy, and he would just select the best of for him. And a lot of that was Ruben Blades. Ruben is known because his work has a lot of complex harmony to it and also social commentary. So my dad could appreciate that layer of it, while my mom doesn't care about any of that and is just like,
She just wants to move.
So that was in both of our ears. And the same thing with Juan Carlos's family, which is what makes it kind of so trippy. His dad played in a rock and roll band in the 60s in Mexico that sung in English. The first band signed to a major label. They were signed to RCA Records in Mexico in the 60s, singing psychedelic rock in Spanish. Or sorry, in English in Mexico. So in English in Mexico. So inverse of us singing in Spanish in Kansas City, they're doing the other thing.
Awesome. Okay.
Meets his wife, Juan Carlos's mother, who was also a hippie into the rock and roll thing, but was also a folkloric dancer. So Juan Carlos grows up in this home, 60s rock and roll, folkloric Mexican music. And I'm 60s, 70s rock and roll. And my mom just likes danceable, salsa, merengue, cumbias, that kind of music. So it started naturally. And through the journey, we realize why it works. It's not, and it has worked successfully a few times. Carlos Santana being probably the greatest, moment where you're like, oh wow, that works beautifully. Why does the blues sound so good with those drums under it? And that is the quest that our band has been on. And being in New Orleans was one of the moments where I had this amazing epiphany about it. But basically, the blues, which is the mother of all American art forms, blues informs jazz, and jazz is like America's greatest gift to the world, often perceived that very Kansas City story.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah.
Nourish our jazz history here. Well, that all the root, the parent of it is the blues. And Jelly Roll Morton, 100 years ago, who is one of the inventors of jazz, was there. Alan Lomax recorded him 100 years ago talking about how he was developing this new style, his participation in it. And he said something profound. He goes, you can't play the blues. This song, I can't take full credit for writing it because what I'm playing with my left hand is actually not mine. It's a song called La Paloma. It's a Cuban song. So he goes, you can't play the blues without the Spanish tinge. He didn't mean Spaniard. He meant those Cuban guys who speak Spanish, who probably look complexion more akin to you, who just happen to have been colonized by Spaniards, and as opposed to the French and the English, in New Orleans. And he's like, I got this from those guys, those musicians. And it goes boom, 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 boom. He's like, you can't play the blues without the Spanish tinge, without that rhythmic influence. So if you can't play the blues without the Spanish tinge, without the influence of Afro-Latino musicians' fingerprint on it, then that means you can't play jazz without it. That means you can't play rock and roll without it. That means we're a part of the story. Oh, it's a blended big story. It's not Elvis's story. It's a much bigger story. And that was so profound for me because it helped me feel more connection to the city.
Mm.
The jazz story is not for me. That's the Caribbean. I'm a Caribbean music story is my story. Kansas City story is jazz, not my story. And all of a sudden, wait, Caribbean rhythmic influence is actually at the bedrock of some of these forms. Whoa, I'm a part of this big story.
Something you said earlier about social commentary, the kind of music that your father enjoyed, piqued another question that I had about the intersection of social justice and activism in your music. Are you intentionally folding social commentary into your music, or is it a product of the environment that you're in?
At the beginning, it was a product of the environment. It was the first album we made was really just talking about like an immigrant family or an immigrant experience in a way. And that became social commentary because of the implications that it has. It was instantly perceived as that. Then the second album was a little even more disconnected from it. It's called I Am Another You. And for me, it was more about what happens when you have family members or best friends who come from really different worlds. And regardless how disparate the actual stories were, the human spirit is so similar. The sound in their voice, the things they're concerned about was kind of the same. It was weirdly the same. And that was what that album was about. And again, it was perceived kind of as a social comment. So Americana, our third album, was intentional.
Okay.
We're like, all right, fine. It's perceived like this. Let's just do it.
Lean into it. Yeah.
Into it. And that's where we intend. Every song is speaking to some sort of social commentary about people of color and immigrant stories. So on that album, Americana, where we chose to have every song speak to one of these social issues, that spawned this whole other idea that was initially meant to be a physical festival. We've been curating a festival in Kansas City for 5 years now. And this concept, well, okay, now COVID's happening. We can't throw a physical event. What could we do? And the physical event always had this component of having a youth stage for kids to perform on. So, well, let's not have our friends just play from their couches. I think we've all seen the singer-songwriter on his couch, his or her couch, strumming their guitar. Why don't we have conversations about the meaning of this? What is the story we're actually trying to tell? And the story we're trying to tell is this big, long human story that music does as great of a job as anything of connecting to. Kind of this idea that it's like some of the most accurate recording of people's moods and intentions from a long time ago. Music is that way. And so we went to Memphis. We were working a lot in Memphis on our new album. And what a beautiful place to start. If you're going to tell the story of rock and roll and where this comes from, or the story of American music, Memphis is arguably the most important city for it. So we had a chance to talk to Deborah Barnes and her children. Her children are rising stars as background singers as well, but she sang with Ray Charles. We had a chance to talk to Boo Mitchell, whose dad, Willie Mitchell, recorded all of Al Green's hits. And Boo still runs that same studio that is preserved almost in a museum-like way, where like the stomp box that you hear on Love and Happiness still lives there. The microphone Al Green records on is in the same spot. The drums are in the same spot to the extent that when Bruno Mars, man, my names, there are too many names in my head right now. When Bruno Mars went to Memphis to record Uptown Funk, he went to that studio because he knew you can lace that sound. I mean, you could go in there and it's the same drum kit that's been there for 50 years, the same organ. So we talked to him, Reverend Charles Hodges, who played on all of Al Green's hits, and talked about where this music really comes from. We also talked to the Simeon family. So Terrence Simeon is like the Zydeco godfather, and he splits his time between Memphis and New Orleans. And talking about the intersection of so many cultures in New Orleans that gave us this soup of language and rhythm and experience that is the kind of like the fertile ground for new innovation in music. And that's where later on you see jazz and blues and rock and roll develop out of this combination of really distinct cultures and people. And that's the beauty of the story. And sometimes that part of it gets weirdly left out.
Everything's influenced by so many things, you know what I'm saying? I always tell people my DNA is jambalaya DNA. You know, my family's been in Louisiana since the 1700s, since 1756.
Wow, that's amazing.
And, you know, my ancestors are from all over the world. I'm part French, African, Spanish, Native American, and German. So when I say jambalaya DNA, I mean jambalaya DNA. But all these cultures coming together organically as families is what created the culture that people know New Orleans for. and South Louisiana. You know, I mean, whether it's the jazz music, whether it's the Mardi Gras Indian music, whether it's the second line Zydeco music, you know, that's all created by ideas from all over the world.
I'm from Panama, but my grandfather went to college at Tulane. My Chinese great-grandfather immigrated to Panama and made enough money. He had scandalous businesses, and he sent my grandfather to New Orleans. Wow. And somewhere in that process, he met a woman from Alabama, married her, went back to Panama, and raised a family. So when I look at my DNA, I have British, but I also have African from Panama, Native American, and I have Spanish from Panama, the Spaniard influence. And then Juan Carlos, my bandmate, is from Mexico.
Same thing, but on my dad's side, we're French. And so I have a French last name, Charron. But yeah, grew up in Mexico, but his dad was full French, blue eyes, light skin, and I look more European than I do Mexican. And so yeah.
Jambalaya DNA too, I guess. But it was a different kind of jambalaya. Sancocho.
Yeah. Or sopita, fideo.
And part of the work that we did is we had the youth collaborate with fantastic Americana artists. Like Kevin Morby is more or less a singer-songwriter, an Americana singer-songwriter, very acclaimed. And he wrote this beautiful song called Midwest, Don't Underestimate Midwest American Sun. And he's joined by the Burney sisters. So they're 15 and 13, and Blessing, who's I think 15 years old. So these three talented young singers who had to rewrite his second verse and then sing along with him. And that just turned out absolutely gorgeous.
And don't underestimate Midwest American sun. Try as you might, but you will not outrun the bun. Do what you want and say what you will. Nothing will cover the faith that's been spilled. Don't underestimate Midwest American sun. I have fun with you. I have fun. I have fun with you. I have fun. I have fun with you. I have fun. And I hope you have fun with me too.
You mentioned kind of having your father and coming from a musical family and just kind of knowing at age 11. And so there's a lot of people who see the world as artist and non-artist. And so I think my question for you is, how important do you think it is for everyone to find their artistic voice?
I think it's super important. I believe that many societies successfully built camaraderie by having everyone participate in the musical moments, in the moments of celebration. The more hunter-gatherer type communities, music was a thing everybody did. There might have been a leader, but everyone had to participate. And so when we started a music camp 9 years ago at the Mattie Rhodes Center. So I met the director that same day that I met Juan Carlos's mom. And about a year or two later, I called him and said, we want to do something in the neighborhood that you have a site in the historic Northeast. Could we start a music camp? The premise there is, even if you've never touched an instrument, by the Friday you're performing. And little by little, we iterated it. And it's like, by the Friday, you're performing a song your team wrote. So you have to write your own piece of music. And so for some of the kids, it literally might be hitting a cowbell on 1, 2, 3, 4, or someone who'd never touched a piano. What are they doing to get through the song? It's a 3-chord song. They're playing the most simple version of each chord and just going ping, 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 ping. And that's it. And you have to keep focused for 3 minutes of doing that. But the attitude that everyone has to participate has been really rewarding, and it works. Kids can rise to the occasion and get ready to perform. The last camp that we had was the previous year, because COVID canceled it this year. The kids performed at the Crossroads. So some of them had never touched an instrument. Now they're at that big stage behind Grinders looking at downtown Kansas City, and they're getting up on stage with like stage hands running, the gear and the cables. And they're like, whoa, this is crazy. They rise to the occasion. And it's as if it triggers some ancient memory of like, oh yeah, we all can do this. All of us know how to do this.
One of the things that you also mentioned was, I've heard you say community and I've heard you say culture. And so I would love to ask what influence you hope your art can have in the world.
That's a deep question. I hope that the art that we make as a band making movies, that it transcends individual culture and language, that it can connect the way that I listened to rock and roll before I spoke English and I felt very connected to it. I hope that happens. And I think that there's a couple different messages, but for me, the main thing that I'm trying to communicate is that music is an ancient technology. And I call it technology because it is like an email. It's ephemeral. You can't touch it. You can't really, you can feel it when it's happening loudly at you. You can feel the vibrations, but yet it's actually the only email we have from the emotional experience of a culture a couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah.
But we have it. We know that a couple of thousand years ago, people played that instrument, and that this rhythm, we can guess, is 2,000 years, goes back in African traditions, at least that far. We don't, maybe farther, right? What other emotional data do we have from some of these pre-writing, prehistoric cultures? Nothing else. If you think about this communal idea of people making music all together in a community, everybody play it, beat the drum, everybody sing the chant. You don't get out and out on this. And you think about the hunter-gatherer life, or the older lifestyles, how traumatic were they? Life and death hung at the balance of every decision you made. So humans had developed a technology to survive a highly traumatic existence. And now here we are, so evolved, and we have walked away from a really well-designed healing tool. And we're just now discovering it. Like, we just discovered music might have healing powers. Oh, really? Okay, yeah. I think we knew that.
Ancient technology, yeah.
Yeah. So that's like, I mean, if I had a life mission or a life goal, it'd be to just remind everybody of that.
So many things are coming to mind and we could go on forever, but I would love for you, which I think you've kind of already done in this conversation, to leave our audience, young people, people of all ages, with some kind of thing that reminds them that art is inside of them. You showed us some great work. What artistic prompt can you leave with our audience that encourages them to go out and have this conversation be a springboard for their own art?
So this is something that we do often in the Rebel Song Academy. And it's that you grab the form of a standard song. And it can be standard. It could be Miley Cyrus's new hit, or it could be This Land Is Your Land. And each has its own merits of doing this exercise with it. But if you grab a song you love it so much that you could recite all the words or more or less sing along with it if it comes in the car. Try writing your own verse to it, to the same form. And write it really simple, like as if you're narrating the most basic story. And then sing that verse back to yourself. You will be amazed at how poetic your simple language sounds when placed inside of a beautiful form. Everybody can create beauty. It's really, I think it's part of all of us have that desire to do that.
Oh, that's so true. Thank you, Enrique. Thank you for spending time with us. And you've sparked some artistic things in me, and I'm hopeful that our audience and everyone who's watching will feel the creative energy, the river that is flowing through you, the creative river that is flowing through you, and that they will use that as a springboard to spark their own artistic influences. Thank you, Enrique.
You're welcome. Thank you. This is a great opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been so great learning and sharing with Enrique, but now we're excited to hear from you. Don't forget, the art prompt is to rewrite the lyrics to your favorite song. You can post them to your social media and tag us at ArtSparksArt, KCRep, or you can email them to us at artspark@kcrep.org.
I'm going back to the couch. I'm going back. And I ain't gonna leave the house. Lazy like a tall palm tree. What am I about to watch now? Hulu put me on game. Prime Video said my name. Netflix put them all to shame. Oh, fleece all on me. Blanket with the leopard imprint. Hold up, do I need a shower? Now I light some incense. Yeah, pure ice. Guzzle down. Left foot. Right foot on my table now. Ooh, going up, Bridgerton, drip on me. Ooh, melanin, TV representing me like ooh. Bridgerton, yeah, I'm still watching. Ooh, I can't forget my shot from my drunk history. Yeah, black cats, maybe that's the reason why they always mad. Yeah, they always mad. I've been black, I know that. Always mad. Honey, come, cause we don't have to watch it live. Whenever Hulu says so, Hulu say there's a new episode standing by. I procrastinate. Got my snacks in my phone. It's a no judgment zone. Got them streaming rights. I'll be here all night. There's a new episode standing by. I procrastinate.
So darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. When you hear this old song, I hope you'll sing along and let your sweet voice ring true. Don't be sad, don't be blue. Let the words comfort you and sing. Sing with me, whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. Thanks.